Hello, everyone, and good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. I am super excited to welcome you to our topic today, the caregiver recruitment funnel, and what top agencies are doing differently. So we'll just give everybody a couple minutes to get logged in and grab their coffee, all that good stuff. Um, cool. Well, do you want to go ahead and start things off, Sam?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, thanks everyone again for joining us today. Like Jen had mentioned, today's session is going to be about identifying where agencies, lose caregivers and what the highest performing agencies do differently. So before we do get started, probably worth Jen and I kind of giving a quick, brief overview of our backgrounds. I'm sure most of you know who Jen is already. She's pretty famous in the home care industry, but I'll kind of get started. Before starting my career, I was blessed enough to have been able to continue my education and athletic career as a student athlete, where I developed discipline, resilience, and teamwork, those values that still guide me today. I then became a recruiter and experienced firsthand what a lot of recruiters still face today when it comes to sourcing, engagement, improving hiring outcomes. Now with Augusta, that experience has allowed me to support recruiters, home care orgs by helping them strengthen their recruiting processes, solve hiring challenges, and turn more applicants into successful hires. So definitely grateful to be here with Augusta. Definitely grateful to have been able to work with Jen.
That's awesome. And Sam is very humble. He's got incredible recruiting experience and not to brag or anything, but was like a D1 football player. So, anyways, for any football fans out there, he could talk your ear off.
And also,
Um,
also D1 as well.
yeah. Um, if we haven't met before, I'm Jen Waldron. I'm one of the three co-founders of Augusta. I got my start in the industry in 2009, so a really long time ago now, as a caregiver. So I was a caregiver in a memory care community for a couple of years, and that made me really passionate about the care that older adults are receiving in vulnerable populations of people, and the jobs basically of the people who are doing the work caring for people. So basically, since 2009, I've been involved in the senior care industry and in a few different capacities, but now with Augusta, trying to help solve the biggest challenge that most agencies face, which is recruiting the right caregivers. So yeah, super happy to share more about this topic and hopefully learn a little bit from you guys today as well.
Nice. Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. And so just a couple of housekeeping items before we do start. This webinar will be recorded, so you can kind of share this with your team, review it afterwards. Also, please feel free to use the Q&A feature throughout the webinar. If something comes to mind, ask it. We'll try and pause throughout and maybe save some time at the end to get those questions answered for you. Um, and also, we would love to learn a little bit more about the audience. So, and what kind of your recruiting challenges are today. So, there will be a quick poll, probably take a quick 30 to 45 seconds. If you guys can fill that out, that's also helpful just because you'll notice that many of those challenges are actually connected and that you aren't the only ones dealing with them. So, let's take a quick 30, 45 seconds if you guys can get those filled out.
Hopefully now you should see that poll on your screen. It's just four questions, four questions. Just a little bit about like what the size of your team is that you're working with and what made you decide to join this webinar, and what your top recruiting challenge is. So hopefully, as Sam said, just 30 seconds or 40 seconds and then we'll share a little bit about who all is in the audience with you. The answers coming in. Thanks so much, guys, for participating. I appreciate you. Give a few more seconds here for folks to answer. Awesome. Looks like about, give or take, about half of people have thrown in some answers there. So,
Thank
um,
you.
yeah, thanks everybody. I think unless we got any last couple people that want to participate, I'm going to go ahead and close that poll. This is your last chance. That always gets a couple more people. Okay. I think everybody who's responded who will respond is has completed it. So, oh no, just kidding. Just kidding. Okay. All right, folks. Now I'm really going to end the poll. Okay. I'm ending it now. Thank you so much for sharing your information. I'm just gonna uh, go through. I'm gonna pull up. Sorry, here. Just share a little bit about who all is on the call with us today and some of the responses that you guys gave. So looks like about half of our group here today has somewhere between 50 and 100 employees. And then the rest of the half of the group it's split almost evenly between having between 100 and 500 employees and 50 and 1 employees. So like there's a big middle group here. About half of the audience is between 50 and 100 employees. And then it's the bell curve, I guess you could say. So that's helpful. Thank you. And then it looks like, let's see here. The main thing that people want to do is learn, it seems like, in terms of the answers that you guys gave, which I really, really appreciate. It seems like we've got, um, I'm just reading through. People wanting to learn about more about Indeed ad spend and how to make the most of it as they're growing, streamlining the process. Several people in here are actually recruiters themselves and wanting to learn more, like about how to keep up with staffing, um, tips for recruitment, just basically people wanting to learn more about how to recruit better and more high quality, attract more high quality applicants. Um, Geez, everybody's pretty much saying learning more about recruiting and retention. So I think you're all in the right place. I love that. Um, some of the top challenges that folks are seeing, it looks like the number one challenge that this group is having is that they're having too many low quality applicants. They're getting that, so that must mean that too many low quality applicants are coming to the surface for you. Not enough of the people who are the right fit for the team. Um, then second, after that, so that's number one biggest challenge that folks are dealing with right now. Number two is not enough applicants in general. And then looks like we had a few other people who had other things that they wanted to mention, which is not showing up to interviews. Um, it was one thing that other people mentioned. Um, so yeah, that's super helpful. I think that idea of too many low quality applicants and not enough applicants, that ties in really specifically with some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. Um, and the answer to low quality applicants might surprise you in terms of what we have to say about it. Because as Sam's going to talk about this in just a minute, but we can't uh, print better caregivers. There's not a magic wand. Um, And if anyone is telling you that there is, I I disagree respectfully. But yeah, so there's not a magic wand to like somehow magically making more high quality applicants, but there are absolutely things under your control that you can do to surface the right applicants. Um, with that, let me pass it back over to you, Sam.
But yeah, so just to kind of set the agenda and where we are headed. So we'll talk just a little bit about Augusta, why recruiting funnels leak. Then we'll look at our actual benchmark data from the industry, discuss what top agencies consistently do differently, and some applicant sources, and just end off on some next steps we can take after this webinar is finished up. But first, just a little context on Augusta and why we are in a unique position to see these trends. And the message is pretty straightforward. It's clear, right? 2x more caregiver hires. And a lot of times, more applicants isn't always the answer. So when agencies think about recruiting, the default assumption is usually we need more applicants, but the agencies getting the best results are often focused on something different, right? They're focused on converting more of the applicants they already have. So, like, think about your recruiting funnel right now. If you're getting applicants but not getting hires, the problem is usually closer to the top of the funnel than you might think, right? So our mission at Augusta is really to help agencies identify those breakdowns and remove friction. And so we've been fortunate enough to gather a lot of data along the way. The insights we'll discuss today aren't based on a handful of agencies, right? They come from a very large sample set. So we work with more than 400 locations. We've processed over a million caregiver applicants, and we've seen agencies increase hires anywhere from 80 to 120% when they improve their recruiting system, their recruiting process. So being able to double the number of care pros they have on their original roster. And so these are just some of our partners, franchises that we currently support. Um, but we'll kind of get into,
And
oh, go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to add one thing, just to going back to this. This is not a magic wand. Um, One of our a really amazing operator that we work with did a webinar with us recently, and basically stated without us prompting him that he was able to hire 2.5 times as many people because his team could process 3 times as many applicants. So it's when we put this stat up on the screen that we're helping our customers increase hires by 80 to 120%, there's no magic wand. It's literally about a system that helps you process. But we didn't want to make this webinar today all about just like becoming an Augusta customer. That's not the point today. We want to make it really educational, but did want to share just a little bit about who we are and what we do. So you can always please feel free to contact us after. We'll talk about the folks who it makes sense to reach out to us at the end of this. But even if you're not an Augusta customer, anytime in the near term, we hope that you can get a lot out of this webinar today. Thanks, Sam.
Yes. Yeah. So again, to kind of get into one of the biggest lessons we've learned, and really to challenge conventional thinking, what if applicant volume isn't really the problem, right? So I want everybody to think about that question for a sec. What if applicants themselves aren't the actual problem? What if the job boards, job channels, sources aren't the problem? What if your recruiting process is creating most of that loss? That's a very different conversation, right? Because most agencies immediately try to buy more leads. But if you're already losing good applicants inside the funnel, adding more volume doesn't really solve the root issue. And
I
so,
to
yeah,
Yeah. I just to piggyback on that, I have talked to a lot of people about their recruiting processes. I'm going to venture to say like probably in the multi thousands of home care agency recruiters and owners and operators. And one thing I hear over and over again from people is that, well, actually, let me ask, because there's the Q&A thing in the, so feel free to like throw up a hand or add like a yes in the Q&A. How many people have tried to spend a whole bunch more on Indeed and not seen better results from it? Yes. Okay, we get a lot of people saying yes. Um, that's what I thought because I talked to a lot of people who have that experience. And if you think about this, so what your ad spend is doing on Indeed, Indeed's a whole they're the top job board. They have the most caregiver applicants. So it's a very important source. But what is really happening when you think about it is your ad spend is largely just controlling how many people are applying to your jobs. It's your volume knob, essentially. And so if you have a process, if you have, let's say, hypothetically, you've got one recruiter and they are manually processing every single applicant. They get 100 applicants in a month and they manual process every single one of them. When you add 200 applicants to that same one recruiter's manual processes, it breaks. They're not able to, and in fact, their results might get worse because they're overwhelmed with too many applicants to really effectively evaluate them and effectively evaluate them on the stuff that really matters for home care. Do they live in the right location for where the clients are? Do they have the right schedule and experience level for for the types of clients that you're normally having? Like that's a different way to process applicants in a different information set to get from every single person immediately than um, than like reviewing their entire resume history for 100 or 200 applicants a month. It's just not possible. So when you turn up that volume knob on a process that has too many manual steps in it and it doesn't allow a frictionless experience, then yeah, it breaks and your results may, in fact, even get worse with that additional volume. I've seen that time and again with folks. So there's usually something in their process that is preventing them from being able to just let the floodgates open, basically. Um, so, anyways, I think it's a really challenging question what Sam just brought up here because I think it's really easy to like, I mean, I was a caregiver myself. I had a lot of coworkers who didn't show up, and that really stunk. You know, where I'm pulling doubles multiple times a week and they're not showing up, and I'm feeling like, what the heck is this? Um, so because of those types of experiences, you get jaded, right? Like that really happens. Like you're thinking about these applicants and you're like, oh, I just wish there was better people that we were working with. But it's a matter of finding the right people out of the big batch. That's really where I think to Sam's point um, is where I see things breaking down for a lot of people is having a system to process the people that you can actually hire, staff, and retain consistently. Um, and that makes or breaks. Okay, I could keep talking about this clearly, but Sam, let me pass it back over to you.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Good transition into kind of what really the caregiver's perspective is, right? So the hiring process should be fairly simple for a caregiver, right? They apply to a job, they get qualified, they get interviewed, and then they get hired. But really, every stage creates an opportunity for drop off. So the agencies that recruit best aren't necessarily getting more applicants; they're losing fewer qualified applicants between each step. So on this image here, for example, we had an internal team member create an Indeed account, apply to a job, and was basically spammed by a bunch of emails on the left here, and text messages on the right. And this was just after applying to one job as a care pro. On average, you all probably know this, care pros are applying to 16, 17 different jobs. So you can imagine what, their inbox looks like after going through that process 16, 17 different times. So really the biggest leak happens before the interview, earlier than most people think. When I ask agency owners where they think they're losing candidates, most will say, no shows, and certainly that is part of the problem, but the data tells us something different, right? The largest leak happens before an interview is actually ever scheduled. Candidates are applying, they're getting distracted, and then they're accepting either other opportunities that moved quicker, or they really just never get engaged quickly enough. So this image here shows what that funnel kind of looks like for a lot of agencies, right? And the candidate is one click applying on that job ad. Then they're having to fill out Indeed screening questions. Depending on how quickly that recruitment team is able to review their resume, their application, those questions, they'll either follow up with additional screening questions through text message or a quick phone screen. At that point, then they are prompted to actually schedule a interview, whether that's virtual or in person, or another phone interview, and usually having to download or create an account to get that interview scheduled. So already those 4 or 5 steps, that could be days in between from actually seeing your job to meeting with somebody. So you will definitely get a lot of qualified applicants fall off because of that reason. It just takes too much time. It could be days in between. And again, they are applying to so many different other opportunities that they're not going to be doing that 16 to 17 times. Um, so we'll kind of put some numbers around it. We use an example, like a typical agency spending, say, like $500 on ads. Imagining they get about 250 applicants entering their funnel, really only about 88 applicants. 88 of those applicants are actually qualified or meet your hiring criteria. That means roughly 163 candidates either abandoned the process or don't qualify. So really think about that, right? Most agencies spend their time worrying about interviews or interview no-shows, but the biggest leak already happened, right? It happened much earlier. So the question is, it isn't how do I get more applicants? It's how do I identify and engage the most qualified applicants faster? Um, and so that'll kind of lead us into two levers that every agency has full control over.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, I think that's such a good example of focusing on the uh, points in the process that affect the most people. And I mean, that in and of itself um, literally changes it has an outsized impact on the rest of your entire hiring funnel. Because if you think about it, there's maybe out of 250 applicants, only there's 88 that are qualified. And then how many are actually getting to an interview out of those ones that are qualified? Maybe 65 of them get to an interview out of the ones that were qualified. And so by that time in the funnel, we're already talking about a fraction of your entire funnel, right? So just by focusing on like converting more applicants from apply to interview will help change the outcomes of your entire funnel. And then secondly, and most importantly, because it has an effect on all parts of your funnel, is generating more applicants who are qualified. And that's a different goal than generating more applicants, period. So to be able to do that really effectively, you need to understand and have a really well-defined business agreement within your company around who is qualified. So I'm going to talk more about that in this towards the end of this meeting, but it's such a critical piece that I think a lot of agencies have been missing, which is really basically what we call identifying your ideal caregiver profile and recruiting for that person, not recruiting for just any old caregiver. And I'll go through it in more detail, but it's more specific than you might imagine. So So yeah, a little bit more on converting more qualified applicants to interviews. Uh, oh, actually, I already. Um, actually, I'm gonna jump in now. So, I was just looking at my notes. Did I cover everything I wanted to say? Um, so, okay, so first things first, I want to talk about improving your conversion, right? So that's the main thing to focus on in absolute numbers because it will have the greatest impact on the rest of your funnel. So we started publishing a benchmark report about 6 months ago. Our next one is coming out in a few weeks, probably at the beginning of July. So keep an eye out for that. But the Q4 report was on about 110, 111,000 caregiver applicants to home care agencies. And we have several findings that we want to share from that report, which um, affect your conversion rate, basically. Um, so the first finding is that most of your hires live nearby. In fact, 76% of the people that you're going to hire live within 20 miles of your service area. So when you're thinking about how you converting more applicants to interviews, it's very likely that the people who live further away would waste your time, basically, because you're not going to hire them. From a macro perspective, we know that like it's so unlikely in comparison to under 20 miles from the center point of any service area that it's probably not worth your team's time. Um, there may, and I'm going to say with a caveat here, there may be reasons why you hire people for areas further out from your service area. It could be that you get a super important 24/7 case with a celebrity who lives in, the boondocks. And so you're absolutely going to take that case. Um, but and so then you need to hire somebody who lives out there, or multiple people who live out there that you normally wouldn't, right? But what we know is like when you're looking at it from the perspective of what I'm going to reference at the when we talk more about is when you're thinking about it from the perspective of who's the person I can hire and staff and reliably retain. Who's this profile of like what are the guardrails around that person? Is probably for your agency is going to be a little bit different, but probably that they live within 20 miles of the center point of your service area. And for context, within our software platform, we geo qualify your applicants to either points on the map that you've given us, like a center point of your service area or a point around your office, or the zip codes of your service area. So we can use all those different things in our software. So that's how we know that the people that you're hiring actually live only within about 20 miles of the center points that our customers have given us. So, any thoughts, questions, comments on how location of the applicant affects your conversion rate? I do see one question coming in. Oh, we got somebody who raised your hand there and then it went down. Somebody in the chat asked, how do we can have control over them, I assume applicants, not having skills? So that's where I would say that's your process for how you identify who's a qualified candidate, right? So we can't change the fact that the applicant doesn't have the skills. We can't necessarily even stop them from applying, actually, and that's not technically it's not legal to do that to stop anybody from applying. But what we can say is that making sure that you know as much as you can up front about whether or not they have the skills that you're looking for. So that way you spend less time or more time on the appropriate applicants, depending on their skills and how that matches with your business. Um, so I would say that's mostly about being efficient with the use of applicants. Um, Christy is wondering, what if we have a large area and multiple zip codes? It's a good question. So within our software platform, the way we're measuring this information is basically our customers tell us a a point or many points on the map that they want us to draw a qualified and concentric okay radius around. So we're basically, you can say, okay, my center point of my service area is around my office, just for ease of explanation. So they put a point where their office is, and then we draw a radius around it, and you decide how big of a radius that is. That's considered your qualified good area for an applicant, and then a concentric okay radius around that. So our customers give us many different points on the map so that way because a lot of times caregivers don't actually live near your office. They live where your clients are and or closer to where your clients are. So you could give us a point that's like the a nexus of your clients essentially and draw a radius around that. Um, our customers also give us the zip codes of their either service area or franchise territory to measure how close applicants are to those points. Um, Hopefully that helps answer the question. Koreana um, asked, I know for us, we have a large service area, so the distance up to 100 miles around our office. Wow, that is a really big service area. Um, yeah, okay. Let me know if there's something specific that you wanted to know about related to that, Koreana. And I hopefully I pronounced your name correctly. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Um, any other questions or thoughts or anything else related to qualifying applicants to your service area so that way you're spending time with the people who live in the right locations or spending your priority time with people who live in the right locations. Sam, did you have anything else to add on this one? No.
No, I think you hit it on the head. I think, yeah, I mean, geography matters, right? I think it's easy to cast a wider and wider net when, you are struggling to fill shifts. But I mean, that just creates challenges, creates friction. At the end of the day, long commutes often lead to like, scheduling conflicts, call-offs, burnout, and ultimately turnover. So distance obviously directly impacts attendance, retention, and just overall your staffing success. So no, I think you hit everything.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, so this I feel like is going to be one with a lot of questions and contentious. But basically, from our big data set, last quarter, 111,000 people, about 25,000 interviews were covered in that report. Because so for context, our software, it automatically identifies top applicants and gets them to schedule their first interview. And then you have tools to basically help them schedule their next steps with all automation, reminders, and all that stuff. So the reason I mention that is because what we're measuring here is of all of our customers, um, how many people basically were hired by the first interview format that the agency chose. So using our software, our customer decides whether they want to make their interviews in person, video, or phone. And so that's a choice of the actual customer of ours. And what we're seeing is that basically in-person interviews are still generating the highest number of hires. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do video interviews or phone interviews. There's totally reasons why it makes sense to do that. And I think a lot of it depends on your whole team too. Like if you're in a position where you have a virtual assistant on your team or you have a recruiter like who's dedicated to screening, that's a different situation. You can probably do like where I completely understand making a separate phone or separate phone or video and in-person interview. Like that makes sense with having that many more resources. You're also probably able to process so many more people with those types of resources on your team as well. So it probably pans out. But generally speaking, what we're seeing is that most hires are made through their first formal interview being an in-person interview. So the way this works in our software, so like more specifically about what we're measuring, is that our customers are allowing applicants who are qualified by Augusta to, or pre-qualified by Augusta to schedule an in-person interview. And that is what's producing in Q4 54% of hires. So let me pause here. I know I just talked a lot. So questions, thoughts, comments? So one person is asking more specifically about experience questions that they would ask using Augusta. So they want to know, are we able to add experience questions on Augusta? Like, do you have experience with clients who have dementia or able to help someone get out of a chair or into a wheelchair? So our software, what it's meant to do is help you identify the top third, give or take, of applicants. And one of the questions that we ask is basically what role they are interested in and explain a little bit about what each role means. So specialty care, for example, is what we call, like, that's our term for somebody who knows about dementia, has worked with people who or have an interest in working with people who have dementia or needs help with transfers and lifts and stuff like that. Um, so, yeah, so we basically get their level of interest in those areas of work as a part of the process. Um, uh, Other questions about um, other questions about interview formats. Hey, thanks so much, Natalie, for sharing that. One, Natalie was sharing that sometimes the applicants unfortunately don't read the descriptions, which, yeah, that's does happen sometimes for sure. And I think to I guess any software out there, I wish I could say that we were able to narrow things down even more specifically for our customers, like getting just the top 10% of applicants for you, and identifying those people. That would be incredible. That's a life life goals for us. But right now we can reasonably identify roughly the top 30% of applicants. So there is still that qualifying that goes on, even when they are in the right location and say that they have a car and driver's license and insurance and all that stuff. There's always going to be a little bit more qualifying that goes into it. And I think the one of the main things is how quickly you're able to get to that first conversation with them is really important because the volume of jobs that they're applying to typically. So yeah, but I really appreciate that feedback and yeah. Um, and I hope to see you at the conference next week. Um, Other questions about in-person interviews or other types of interview formats, anything like that? Okay. All right. I'm going to move on. I thought that was going to be more of a surprise to people, but perhaps not. Okay. So then, last but not least, since we know that it's like not that many people who are actually qualified based on really basic criteria about them, like do they live in the right location? Do they have at least um, some of the schedule that will match with the types of clients that you have, really basic stuff like that. Um, since it's not that many people in the grand scheme of your entire funnel, the speed from application to first interview is one of the most critical parts of the whole hiring process. So I think it's been out there for many years now that we need to be really quick with hiring caregivers. And I think most recruiters really strive to do that and make that happen. What our data is showing is just a little bit more specific about that. So it's basically that within, from the point of somebody applying to having their first real interview, their first formal interview, it should be less than 4 days to make sure that you're not losing people in your funnel, basically. So um, you are literally 50% less likely to hire somebody if it goes more than 4 days from the point they apply to their first formal interview. Any questions on this one? Thoughts, comments? Okay. All right. Well, so one question or one comment from Andy here is that yeah, mentioning about what if they select a date on the calendar that isn't within 4 days? So that's a really great question. Actually, Andy, since I know your client, there is actually a setting where you can stop them from scheduling more than 4 days out, which way I would recommend. So if you're not familiar with how to do that, happy to show you or have our team help you with it. Okay. All right. So Sam, do you want to summarize?
Yeah, well, to summarize what we've learned from the benchmark data, top performing agencies tend to do five things extremely well. So, one, they identify and contact qualified applicants immediately, right? Speed is a competitive advantage. So, trying to get that interview scheduled within 4 days is a huge part of kind of starting that process. They recruit close to active clients, right? They understand that geography impacts attendance, scheduling, and overall retention. Three, they make scheduling incredibly easy. Again, every extra step is an opportunity for drop off and can create friction. So being able to streamline that interview process is a huge win. Um, they interview within 4 days, right? Nearly 60% of hires come from candidates interviewed within that time frame. And five, they recruit for retention, right? They aren't just asking can we hire this caregiver? They're really asking, can this caregiver succeed with us here 6 months from now? And so, yeah, the agencies seeing the strongest growth aren't necessarily spending more on recruiting. They're simply creating less friction throughout that caregiver journey.
Well, yeah, I'll caveat that a little bit. I mean, like we talked about, your ad spend, it's pretty much turning up the volume
Mm,
knob on quantity,
correct.
basically. I mean, there's there's definitely some sources which will help you get a better applicant to hire rate or different applicant to hire rate that it absolutely exists. Like, for example, we know that applicants who visit your website first are like generally more qualified. It doesn't mean that it means that they're more interested in like your actual company, you guys, not just a job, right? So like, but the so I guess I would say like there's that aspect of it where your ad spend is controlling volume, and it's important to look at like which sources are best converting. But overall, the stuff we've been talking about with your process affects every source, no matter what. I am going to talk a little bit more about sources in just a minute here. But any questions so far and kind of what the top things are that high performing agencies are doing differently? Okay. So all of I will say all of it, when you put it in a bulleted list like this, like looks easy. And I bet a lot of people look at it and they're like, oh, I feel like we're already doing this stuff. Um, But the reality is, it's really hard to do consistently at scale. And that's where I think a lot of people fall down. And it becomes really, really challenging. Because when you're processing 200, 500 applicants a month, making sure that every applicant gets processed the same way every time is really tough to do because we're people and we want to be like we miss like we're just people, it is difficult to do that the exact same way every single time, and so that's where things can for better or for worse go awry. So okay, so with that said, um I want to go into recruiting for retention. So that was Sam's last bullet point here. And this goes back to what I was saying at the very beginning, which is the idea of defining a ideal caregiver profile for your agency. So top agencies basically have really specific criteria, and I'm talking very specific criteria, which is a part of a total business agreement within the entire organization that this is the type of person that we will consistently hire, staff, and retain. So let me explain a little bit more about what I mean. Um, you may not have necessarily actually uncovered this yet at your business, but there is almost definitely a pattern to the people that you retain. So there's this is can be a whole nother webinar on just this topic. So I'm really just going to glance over it today. But what I'm talking about is that there is a pattern of if you were to look at basically all the people in the last 90 days who have turned over and all the people in the last 90 days who stayed, there's almost definitely a pattern in how many hours they were given, their proximity to clients, the schedule that they asked for and were actually put on, the level of skills and experience they have that and whether or not it actually matched with the client. Um, I'm not saying just those factors, but like those are some examples of factor categories where you can start to see patterns. And so the agencies that have really are super high performing have done that analysis and know, for example, that they are just not able to retain any caregivers who ask for 40 hours a week. They get tons of people asking for 40 hours a week, but they can't retain them. Um, and so for that reason, that should probably be a part of your ideal caregiver profile, that it's that we're not able to retain that person. So we have to treat them really differently than an applicant who fits much better into our ideal caregiver profile. So like this is an example of what your ideal caregiver profile might look like after you've done an analysis of who churned in the last 90 days and who stayed in the last 90 days based on how many hours did they ask for that they were actually given, how far away were they from their clients actually, your clients actually, like did they ask to stay within 20 minutes driving of their house but were asked to drive 40 minutes instead, or did they ask for 40 hours a week and they were only given 20? Those types of really concrete factors will help you understand who your ideal, basically the difference between those two groups is your ideal caregiver profile, and top agencies are recruiting for that specifically. So it doesn't mean that you don't hire people outside of it, but it does mean that you have a really specific agreement with those people. So if you're going to hire somebody who needs 40 hours to live, to pay their bills, to live, to take care of their family, they need 40 hours, you should be making it really clear that that is not what you guys do. But you can put them on this case right now and you can reevaluate with them in 4 weeks to see if you can get them another 10 hours a week that they need, but you cannot guarantee it. And so then that really like makes a much more specific, clear deal with the applicant of a specific time frame that you're going to get back in touch on whether or not 40 hours a week is going to be possible. Um, so that's how I would recommend handling somebody who's outside of your ICP. But this is an example of what an ICP would look like. So it's a caregiver who lives with, this is just fake information, but it could be like it's from a real exercise that we did. So a caregiver living within 15 miles of the nexus of your clients. So like I said, like that there's certain pockets where you have way more clients than others, right? And that's where you want to hire people from. So caregiver who lives within 15 miles of those pockets of clients. And they're seeking stable recurring hours between 25 and 30 hours a week. They can be matched. They can be staffed within 1 day of orientation and matched with a client that has the care level that they're aligned to based on their experience and preferences. So here's the thing. I bet there's some recruiters out there who's like, you know what, that's what I try and do right now. But what happens, and this is nobody's fault, everybody's trying to do their own amazing work out there. But what often happens is that the business takes on clients that do not fit within the ICP that you are trying to hire for. And that's really where retention tends to tick up pretty significantly, or turnover rather. So the idea of this ICP is that it's literally a business agreement. So it's both sales and marketing and recruiting who have the same understanding of what you're selling and what you're hiring. So it means that even though the salesperson wants to sell the client who lives in the boondocks and like has all these specialty needs and they only want 2 hours a week, like of course, as a salesperson, you want to sell everything, but like, okay, let me give you this example. Sam and I, we help home care agencies who are a good fit to work with us buy our home care hiring software. If Sam and I started to go sell our home care hiring software to Pizza Hut, our customer service team would pull their hair out. They would fire us. That's a really crass example of this idea, right? So it's the business alignment around who is an ideal caregiver and what are the concrete factors about them, and then having really clear agreement with people who are outside of that profile. Or the sales team should tell you why they sold the client who doesn't match with your ICP. Like there should be a really strong business case for that. And there may be, like that does happen. Like I said, there could be that 24/7 case that's like got a huge network. You know that you can get more business if you get that one client or something like that. Like there's totally reasons why. But okay, so I just talked a lot about the idea of the ideal caregiver profile. So any questions? We are running out of time here, so I'm going to wrap up. No questions right now. Okay. Well, if something comes to you later, please don't hesitate to reach out. Love talking about this stuff. Okay, so last but not least, sources of applicants. So if I'm going way back now to way back here, the basically two things that we talked about focusing on are literally converting more applicants from apply to interview. And then the second piece is focusing on generating more of the qualified applicants. But to be able to generate more qualified applicants, you need to know your ICP, right? Like, so knowing who is actually qualified is a key component of then being able to actually say, okay, to find more of that person, here's where I go, or here's how much more ad spend I need to do. That's a different goal than just hiring anybody or like posting ads to get any old caregiver, right? It's like much more specific. So, and gives you like a more precise target on who to spend your time with, right? But with all that said, we do have data on like overall best converting sources of applicants from our benchmark report. So these are the top sources of applicants by conversion, essentially. So Indeed.com still absolutely number one, 66% of applicants, 59% of hires. So that it's just worth investing in. If you're having trouble with your conversion rate on Indeed, I think that's a different question. So like if you get 100 applicants a month and you can only hire 2 people out of it, that's likely a process issue, rather than like the source itself, because 59% of hires are still made there. And so hopefully that's helpful to think about. Not a not an attack or anything like that. Is really just meant to say that like data wise, almost 60% of people get hired through Indeed. So it's the uh, worth working on how you process the applicants, not just disregarding the source itself. Okay, so then your website, low volume in comparison, but very high conversion. So we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. People who go to your website are really interested in your company, not just a job. You can see from this report here, last quarter it was 17% of applicants, but 30% of hires. So almost 2x conversion rate. So it's worth your time to figure out how do I get more volume through my website. Google ads, social ads, stuff like that will literally, they're just better converting applicants who come through your website. Um, and then other kind of more minor sources in terms of volume, Craigslist, Google, Facebook, all decent conversion rates. Low volume, but decent conversion. So probably worthwhile sources. Um, then other sources to consider are offline events and a website chat widget of some kind. So we know that offline events are also very low volume. So like when you go to a career fair or have a partnership with a school where you like go to their graduation class or something like that, um, those usually convert at 2x also. So if you get 10 applicants, you'll probably hire five, something like that. Um, the website chat widget. So once you've got decent traffic to your website, literally having more ways to convert people from your website to a interview will help you hire more. So those leads that people who chat in, like on your website, are very high converting. Um, okay, so now we are overtime, I think, or just about overtime here, and want to wrap things up. Sam, do you want to take this, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I mean you can handle it.
Okay, so how Augusta helps. If you are experiencing any of these problems and you're already spending some money on job ads, we would love to talk with you and see if we can help. Um, you're not getting the number of hires you need to grow. You are getting applicants, but very few interviews. Your recruiting feels like chaos or too many steps or disorganized. Any of those types of issues, we'd love to chat with you and see if we can actually help you with our software. And so I'll put Sam's info up on the screen. Feel free to reach out to me as well, but Sam is an excellent resource to help you evaluate your caregiver recruiting process and Augusta, what we do, and see if we could potentially be helpful to some of those issues. So, any other questions, thoughts, comments, anything at all? I hope this was helpful to you guys. Even if you're not a client in the near term. So like Sam said at the beginning, we recorded this. We'll post it up in the next couple of days and send it out in an email. And please just don't hesitate to get in touch if we can help with anything at all. So
Thank you all.
thanks, everybody.